Nationalism is the belief that nations are a timeless phenomenon. It is based on the belief that people have been attached to the practices connected with their heritage and seeks to continue them freely. The core ideas and principles of nationalism state that nations, self-determination, the nation-state, culturalism, racialism and internationalism shape how national identity and political authority develop. The idea of nation states that people who identify themselves as a cohesive group share values that bind them together as a distinct community. The idea that there are very different ways of defining a nation states that nations can be understood through ethnic ties, civic values, cultural bonds or political commitments. Based on the idea of nations, the nationalist view on human nature states that humans naturally form attachments to their national community. Based on the idea of nations, the nationalist view on the economy states that economic organization should support the interests and cohesion of the national group. Based on the idea of nations, the nationalist view on society states that society is held together by shared identity, common culture, and collective belonging. Based on the idea of nations, the nationalist view on the state states that the state should defend and embody the identity and will of the nation. The idea of self-determination states that nations should decide how they are governed and pursue their own political destiny. The idea of the nation as a genuine political community capable of self-government states that the nation is seen as a collective with the maturity, unity and legitimacy to rule itself. Based on the idea of self-determination, the nationalist view on human nature states that people are driven by a desire to shape their political future through their nation. Based on the idea of self-determination, the nationalist view on the economy states that economic control should rest with the nation to sustain independence and autonomy. Based on the idea of self-determination, the nationalist view on society states that society should empower its members to participate in a shared national project. Based on the idea of self-determination, the nationalist view on the state states that the state gains legitimacy from expressing the collective will of the nation. The idea of nation-state states that a nation rules itself in its own state and directs its own economy. The understanding that the nation-state, while supported by most nationalists, is not universally supported states that some nationalists believe identity can flourish without a separate state while others prioritize cultural bonds over territorial sovereignty. Based on the idea of nation-state, the nationalist view on human nature states that humans seek security and fulfillment through membership of a self-governing national community. Based on the idea of nation-state, the nationalist view on the economy states that national control of economic policy protects cultural identity and collective prosperity. Based on the idea of nation-state, the nationalist view on society states that society thrives when unified under a national government that reflects shared identity. Based on the idea of nation-state, the nationalist view on the state states that the state exists to uphold national unity and safeguard independence. The idea of culturalism states that nationalism is based on shared cultural societal values that shape identity and belonging. The idea that some forms of nationalism are grounded in more mystical, emotional ties states that certain nationalisms draw on deep sentiment, symbolism and historical memory. The idea that some forms of nationalism also reflect on the darker side of nationalism states that emotional nationalism can foster exclusion, intolerance and conflict. Based on the idea of culturalism, the nationalist view on human nature states that humans are shaped by cultural bonds that connect them to their nation. Based on the idea of culturalism, the nationalist view on the economy states that economic life should preserve and strengthen cultural identity. Based on the idea of culturalism, the nationalist view on society states that society is a cultural community bound by shared traditions and values. Based on the idea of culturalism, the nationalist view on the state states that the state should protect cultural heritage and promote unity. The idea of racialism states that humankind can be meaningfully divided into separate races that possess different natures. The view held by a very small group of nationalists who believe that nationhood is determined purely by biological factors states that these nationalists argue that racial characteristics alone define the boundaries of the nation. Based on the idea of racialism, the nationalist view on human nature states that human behavior and identity are shaped by racial traits. Based on the idea of racialism, the nationalist view on the economy states that economic organization should prioritize the perceived interests of the dominant racial group. Based on the idea of racialism, the nationalist view on society states that society is seen as structured around racial differences and hierarchies. Based on the idea of racialism, The nationalist view on the state states that the state should preserve the purity and dominance of the racial nation. The idea of internationalism states that the world should unite across boundaries to advance common interests in society. The idea that some forms of nationalism also have an internationalist perspective, whereas other internationalists reject nationalism, states that certain nationalists see cooperation between nations as enhancing national goals, while some internationalists argue that nationalism creates division. Based on the idea of internationalism, the nationalist view on human nature states that humans can pursue national identity while still engaging in global cooperation. Based on the idea of internationalism, the nationalist view on the economy states that economic collaboration can support national prosperity and shared global progress. Based on the idea of internationalism, the nationalist view on society states that societies gain strength by embracing both national community and international solidarity. Based on the idea of internationalism, the nationalist view on the state states that the state can protect national interests while working constructively with other nations. The different types of nationalism include liberal nationalism, conservative nationalism, anti- or post-colonialism, and expansionist nationalism. Liberal nationalism seeks a world of autonomous nation-states united by shared commitment to freedom and equality. The liberal nationalist view on nation states that nations are voluntary communities defined by shared civic values. The liberal nationalist view on self-determination states that all nations possess an equal right to decide their own political future. The liberal nationalist view on the nation-state states that nation-states should coexist peacefully and respect each other's sovereignty. The liberal nationalist view on racialism states that racial distinctions have no legitimate role in defining nationhood. The liberal nationalist view on internationalism states that cooperation between free nations strengthens global harmony. The liberal nationalist view on human nature states that individuals are rational beings capable of forming civic loyalties. The liberal nationalist view on the economy states that economic systems should support liberty and fairness within and between nations. The liberal nationalist view on society states that society should rest on tolerance, civic unity, and equal rights. The liberal nationalist view on the state states that the state should protect individual liberty while expressing the democratic will of the nation. Conservative nationalism exists to forge a sense of cohesion and unity within society through shared history and tradition. The conservative nationalist view on nation states that nations grow organically from long-standing culture and heritage. The conservative nationalist view on self-determination states that national independence protects continuity and social order. The conservative nationalist view on the nation-state states that a strong nation-state preserves identity and safeguards tradition. The conservative nationalist view on racialism states that identity is rooted in culture rather than biological race. The conservative nationalist view on internationalism states that international involvement should be cautious and should not undermine national unity. The conservative nationalist view on human nature states that people are shaped by custom, belonging, and inherited identity. The conservative nationalist view on the economy states that economic policy should strengthen national stability and preserve social harmony. The conservative nationalist view on society states that society depends on shared values, patriotism, and respect for tradition. The conservative nationalist view on the state states that the state should defend national unity and uphold established institutions. Anti- or post-colonialism rejects colonial rule and seeks to have governance return to the indigenous population. The post-colonialist view on nation states that nations oppressed by colonialism must reclaim cultural and political identity. The post-colonialist view on self-determination states that colonized peoples are entitled to recover full autonomy. The post-colonialist view on the nation-state states that creating or restoring a nation-state is essential for liberation. The post-colonialist view on racialism states that racial hierarchies imposed by colonialism must be dismantled. The post-colonialist view on internationalism states that solidarity between formerly colonized nations supports global justice. The post-colonialist view on human nature states that people seek dignity and freedom when liberated from oppression. The post-colonialist view on the economy states that economies must be rebuilt to serve national empowerment rather than colonial interests. The post-colonialist view on society states that society must be repaired through cultural renewal and collective self-worth. The post-colonialist view on the state states that the state must represent the interests of the indigenous population and protect sovereignty. Expansionist nationalism rejects the right of all nations to self-determination and is usually linked to chauvinism. The expansionist nationalist view on nation states that some nations are superior and destined to dominate others. The expansionist nationalist view on self-determination states that only privileged nations deserve autonomy. The expansionist nationalist view on the nation-state states that powerful nations should expand territory to reflect their dominance. The expansionist nationalist view on racialism states that supposed racial superiority justifies hierarchy and conquest. The expansionist nationalist view on internationalism states that international cooperation is undesirable when it restricts national ambition. The expansionist nationalist view on human nature states that humans are driven by competition and the pursuit of supremacy. The expansionist nationalist view on the economy states that economic strength should be used to advance national power. The expansionist nationalist view on society states that society should be united around ideas of superiority and national destiny. The expansionist nationalist view on the state states that the state should mobilize the nation towards expansion and dominance. The key nationalist thinkers include Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Johann Gottfried von Herder, Giuseppe Mazzini, Charles Maurras, and Marcus Garvey. The ideas of Jean-Jacques Rousseau state that the general will and civic nationalism should shape legitimate political authority. The idea of general will states that government should be based on the indivisible collective will of the community and that nations have the right to govern themselves. The idea of civic nationalism states that the state is legitimate because it is based on the active participation of its citizens. Rousseau's view on self-determination states that nations should freely express their collective will. Rousseau's view on the nation-state states that a legitimate nation-state reflects shared civic commitment. Rousseau's view on culturalism states that civic participation outweighs cultural difference. Rousseau's view on racialism states that race has no place in determining the character of the nation. Rousseau's view on internationalism states that cooperation between nations can flourish when each is guided by its general will. Rousseau's view on human nature states that humans are capable of moral freedom when acting collectively. Rousseau's view on the economy states that economic life should support civic equality and the common good. Rousseau's view on society states that society should be unified through collective participation and shared purpose. Rousseau's view on the state states that the state must be the expression of the general will. The ideas of Johann Gottfried von Herder state that cultural nationalism and the Volk form the foundation of national identity. The idea of cultural nationalism states that every nation is different and that each possesses its own unique cultural character. The idea of Volk states that the people are the root of national culture and special nature known as Volksgeist which each nation should try to express. Herder's view on self-determination states that nations should determine their future through their cultural character. Herder's view on the nation-state states that the nation-state should protect and express the Volk. Herder's view on culturalism states that culture is the essence of nationhood. Herder's view on racialism states that race does not define a nation because culture matters more than biology. Herder's view on internationalism states that nations should respect each other's cultural uniqueness. Herder's view on human nature states that humans are shaped by the cultural world into which they are born. Herder's view on the economy states that economic life should sustain the cultural traditions of the nation. Herder's view on society states that society gains strength from shared culture and inherited customs. Herder's view on the state states that the state should preserve the cultural spirit of the nation. The ideas of Giuseppe Mazzini state that nationhood and action form the basis of human freedom. The idea of nationhood states that humans can fully express themselves only through their nation and that human freedom rests on the creation of one's own nation-state. The idea of action states that intellectualism must be rejected in favor of thought and action. Mazzini's view on self-determination states that nations must act decisively to achieve independence. Mazzini's view on the nation-state states that the nation-state is essential for human flourishing. Mazzini's view on culturalism states that shared moral values unite the nation. Mazzini's view on racialism states that nationhood should not be defined by race. Mazzini's view on internationalism states that free nations should cooperate to advance liberty. Mazzini's view on human nature states that humans strive for moral purpose through national service. Mazzini's view on the economy states that economic life should uphold national unity and virtue. Mazzini's view on society states that society should be inspired by patriotic duty and collective purpose. Mazzini's view on the state states that the state should guide the nation toward moral and political progress. The ideas of Charles Moore state that integral nationalism and militarism shape a powerful and unified nation. The idea of integral nationalism states that individuals should submerge themselves into their nation through intense emotional loyalty. The idea of militarism states that integral nationalism encourages nations to cultivate a strong military ethos. Moore's view on self-determination states that national unity is more important than democratic choice. Moore's view on the nation-state states that a strong authoritarian state should embody national values. Moore's view on culturalism states that national culture must be strictly preserved. Moore's view on racialism states that some groups threaten the purity of the nation. Moore's view on internationalism states that international cooperation weakens national strength. Moore's view on human nature states that humans require order and hierarchy to flourish. Moore's view on the economy states that economic policy should strengthen national power and social unity. Moore's view on society states that society should be strictly ordered to maintain national cohesion. Moore's view on the state states that the state should be authoritarian to protect national identity. The ideas of Marcus Garvey state that Black pride and Pan-Africanism aim to unite African people across the world. The idea of Black pride states that African people should be proud of their race and recognize beauty in their own kind. The idea of Pan-Africanism states that African people everywhere are one people who must put aside cultural and ethnic differences to progress. Garvey's view on self-determination states that African people must reclaim control over their own destiny. Garvey's view on the nation-state states that a united African nation-state is necessary for empowerment. Garvey's view on culturalism states that shared heritage strengthens unity across the African diaspora. Garvey's view on racialism states that racial solidarity is essential for liberation. Garvey's view on internationalism states that global unity among African peoples is vital for progress. Garvey's view on human nature states that humans gain strength from pride in their identity. Garvey's view on the economy states that economic independence is essential for racial uplift. Garvey's view on society states that society should be built on unity and collective purpose. Garvey's view on the state states that the state should protect and advance the interests of African people worldwide. Thank you for watching this video on nationalism. I'll see you in the next one.